Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar, State of Oracle Forms, with our special guest, Mike Ferrante. Our goal today is that by the end of this webinar, you'll have more information and more knowledge about the Oracle Forms roadmap. You also may get to know the ORMIT suite and how those tools make it easy to analyze, upgrade, modernize existing Forms applications. We'll cover a few Forms enhancements areas and modernizations ideas. And we'll also introduce a new shell terminal product designed for Oracle Forms. So my name is Patrick Amo. I'm a CEO, president of RENAPS. I've been a technical expert for many years before launching RENAPS, and I'm an Oracle certified DBA and application developer. And Michael, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Well, hopefully everyone has met me before, but if not, I am Michael Ferrante. I do work for Oracle. I am the product manager for Oracle Forms as well as some other products, but Forms in particular. I've been with Oracle for 21 years. November 15th was my 21st anniversary. So it's been a long time, and it's hopefully going to take me all the way to the end of the road for retirement.
All right. And yes, and I personally followed you, Mike, for many years. Always glad to get also some support from you when we face some complex Forms problems or questions. So we're glad you're here today with us to help us through this webinar and share us information about the future of Forms as well.
Excellent.
All right. In terms of our agenda today, so maybe a quick first overview about RENAPS, about RENAPS also and Forms, our history. From there, we'll go to Mike's presentation covering Oracle Forms roadmap, what we have in Forms and what's coming into the new versions of Forms. Then we'll jump into the ORMIT suite, among which we'll cover a few aspects from the ORMIT Analyzer, ORMIT Forms, look into upgrading and modernizing applications. We'll touch the subject of Oracle reports and what to do with customers that right now run still on and still have reports. And also we'll be introducing what we've been talking about, the new terminal for Oracle Forms. So at the end of this presentation, we will be sending out a questionnaire to all attendees after that presentation. So from those questionnaires, there's a few questions that will be asked, covering your overall experience with Forms and what are your overall intentions for the future. So from the answers, we'll just pick 3 random participants and that will win a $100 Amazon gift card. So at the center of everything we do, and really at the center of everything also we produce or we service, we have our team. And our team is really our most important asset at RENAPS. We have a dedicated center of excellence based in Montreal. We also have offices in New York and presence in different other countries, among which, in the US, in New York, but also in Ontario and in France. Our team comprises of 35 different expertise. So by these expertise, I mean database, middleware, engineered systems, even licensing advisory. So that's more on the infrastructure side, I would say. And then on the application side, the Oracle Forms is a very central and important technology for RENAPS. So we do a lot of development, we do Forms maintenance, and at the same time, of course, a lot of Oracle Forms upgrades and modernization. So we have the largest team for forms modernization in America. When we look into the development lifecycle of any application, so our team jumps into any area, whether it's functional analysis, business analysis, and then to a technical analysis, design, and of course the development, implementation, testing. So basically every stage of an application development program is taken care of by our team. And the way we do that is that we act more as an extension to your team. So we have a program called RENAPS On Demand, and that basically makes our whole team available to you, whether you need assistance for application development or for database expertise, middleware. All of that is basically an on-demand program where you can leverage our team, our expertise. At the same time, also take advantage of our tooling and our techniques, methodologies to really save time and automate as much as possible through the type of projects that we take care of. Expertise, still presenting RENAPS a bit. So we cover the whole stack. So starting from server, virtual machines, OS, and most importantly, database and middleware. Our team covers several technologies. Oracle is at the center again of that, but we do also technologies in terms of infrastructure, among which some of what you see right here. So some customers come to us just because they need MySQL, sometimes database management, and we'll of course help with our experts. And in terms of cloud services, we also have several experts that are certified in the Oracle Cloud as architects. And so in terms of architecting or putting together the best scenario for your environment to be maybe lifted and shifted to the cloud or integrated into a cloud product, whether you're looking for the database, the middleware. So we do that. We help customers into the analysis phase, understanding where there might be some good value and good return investment with the Oracle Cloud, and of course help you as well do that migration to the cloud. So through the years, we've accumulated a certain number of partnerships and of certifications with Oracle, among which, well, most importantly today, the WebLogic, we're an Oracle WebLogic certified partner, and several other infrastructure partnerships as well. All right, so let's jump into Oracle Forms. RENAPS and Oracle Forms is a partnership that's been already here for 13 years. RENAPS started in 2001. 2001, it's already 19 years, but we can say that the last 13 years of RENAPS were acting as a partner with Oracle. We've done a lot of upgrades, modernizations, and migrations, starting from Oracle Forms, Oracle Reports, to even databases. All of that is expertise we'll very and gladly share with everyone. With the overall team, if we look at technical experts, that's our team. From those 60 experts that I was talking about, we have a number of expertise within that. And as I mentioned before, center of many of our solutions. ORMIT stands for Oracle Migration. In ORMIT, we have a suite of tools, and I have a slide a bit further down to show and to explain what's included and what do we have in those, focusing on Organizer as well as ORMIT Forms and how those two tools can help upgrading but also modernizing engineering and automating all of these tasks that are tedious, manual, repetitive sometimes. So it makes it much easier and faster to accomplish what you want to accomplish. So if we look at the wheel and we go around it, you have the Oracle Forms Upgrade, which tool, which is also a re-engineering tool at the same time. We'll cover RENAPS Migration Suite are specialized tools to migrate, as an example, migrate reports to Analytics Publisher. Analytics Publisher, which is the new name for BI Publisher. Analyzer is an X-ray scan, so it helps do code analysis and also code optimization. So there's a few great things of what Analyzer can do, and we'll look into that as well. We have a single sign-on solution called RAM. So RAM stands for RENAPS Access Manager, and it's a tool, well, not just a tool, it's a platform for access management that's been designed for Oracle Forms. We also do a lot of Oracle compliance mandates where we help customers by non-compliances, if any, and also optimize their software asset. Make sure they can sleep well at night and that their actual assets in terms of licensing are in line with their usage. And then our cloud services and the RENAPS on-demand model, which basically, as I mentioned before, makes available our whole technical team directly as an extension to your team. So look at Forms, and it's been here for years, I believe more than 40 years, and it's still a very valuable investment. And why? Well, first, because there's years and years of investment into that technology. That means literally millions of lines of codes that are perfectly aligned with your business processes. So I was myself a Forms developer and also DBA before starting RENAPS many years ago, and I realized how efficient developing application with. If you look at Forms and the rapidity and the speed at which you can start from an idea and deploy an application that could be used and it will bring value to customers, it's pretty impressive, especially when you want to develop on the Oracle database. And most importantly, well, Forms is constantly improving. It's also constantly innovating. And from here, maybe we can pass on to you, Mike, to go into the roadmap of the Oracle Forms application. So we'll simply move on.
Yep. So we could certainly do that. Some of the slides or the information most of you will see here is probably information you've seen before, but we'll kind of update it as we go through. Of course, because we're talking about roadmap, future going, I asked Patrick to include the Oracle Safe Harbor statement, just so that everyone understands that some of the information I might share here may not actually make it into a particular product version that you're expecting. So just in case there's any confusion, kind of use all this for informational purposes. So if you would step forward, Patrick, one more.
Here we go.
So in my original slides where these came from, we originally talked about what was available in Forms today, in other words, like version 12 and what options you have. We talked about why upgrading was so important, and then of course we talked about roadmap, and then briefly talked about reports. As we go through the RENAPS flow of these slides, we may jump around a little bit, but all this information will get covered as we go. Patrick, if you go to the next slide.
Sure.
Yep. So for Forms today, for those of you that don't already know, the latest version is 12.2.1.4, which is the last planned release for the version 12 family. What we expect beyond that from a version number is still unknown. We are anticipating calling it version 14, which would be in line with what WebLogic Server has recently done. So we probably will follow that course of action. We do continue to develop and enhance the product and support it, of course, and we will continue to support it into the foreseeable future. So I'm pretty excited about that. Like I had said before, hopefully this will take me long into my retirement. And again, new releases are planned and going forward as we go. As of right now, the support dates for 12.2.1.4 look as they're shown there. August 2022 for Premier support. Extended support will take you out into August 2025. And as mentioned in that third bullet, we may be adjusting those dates to your advantage in the event that the next major release gets delayed for any reason. The exact release date of the next release is, as always, something we cannot share, but what I will tell you is we are anticipating something in the 2022 timeframe, very early 2022, possibly late 2021. But again, that date is a moving target because we are very early in the development cycle. If we do move far into 2022, the dates you see here will get adjusted so that at no time will you be out of support options. So that should be pretty good news. Next slide. So some of the new features in 12.2.1.4 that you may or may not be familiar with are included here. I am not going to go through every one of these, but down at the bottom of this page, you'll see a URL to the new features guide, which has approximately 40 pages of overview information of all the new features, or at least most of the new features. Again, for those of you that follow me throughout the course of the product lifespan, you know that I've talked about this many, many times. But some of the key features I will point out here, for example, in 12.2.1, well, in the 12.2.1 family, we introduced integration with Analytics Publisher. The thinking behind that was to help customers migrate off of Oracle reports onto a more modern reporting solution. We added the Forms standalone launcher, which was a browserless solution to help mitigate the fact that browser vendors decided they don't want to support plugins anymore. And again, without going through all of these, we'll skip right to the last one. As of October, we have added support with Forms to use the autonomous database, which potentially becomes very valuable, especially if you're planning on running Forms in cloud, which is also an option for you. We do have what we call a marketplace image available in Oracle Cloud that will allow you to provision a Forms environment in approximately 15 minutes or less. So inside of 15 minutes, you could have an entire Forms environment, at least a basic install, installed, configured, and running. So for most of you that have downloaded the software before, you know that it probably takes you about 15 minutes to download and extract the software. We're actually going to install, configure, and start all the servers for you in that same amount of time. So checking out what we have in cloud might be something worth looking at.
We have a few, yes, so we just have a few questions that came in. So I'm thinking maybe we can address all of them at the end or right now, but maybe at the end so we can centralize all the questions at one step.
Sure, we could do that. And some of them I'll just, while you're speaking, Patrick, I'll go ahead and respond to some of them directly in the chat.
Perfect. All right, we'll do that. Thank you.
So I mentioned the cloud marketplace, and the slide we have up right now kind of illustrates that down at the bottom. If you're interested in trying out Forms in cloud without having to go through all the pain that goes into downloading, extracting, installing, and learning how the install guide works and all that stuff, you could skip over all that and leverage Oracle Cloud with this marketplace image, and literally with a click of a button on the right there, Get App, and answering a few questions, you could get an instance up and running. So that's certainly worth checking out.
It's exactly, and it's pretty awesome. We've tried it, and the rapidity at which you can put together a new instance up and running and start working is outstanding. At the same time, it makes it easy for everyone to avoid all the complexity that could come with setting up WebLogic.
Exactly. And the other thing to note is that as of right now, the image that's available today offers the option of connecting to either a local in-cloud instance database, which will also get installed for you if you choose that, or database cloud service. In the next update that we're hoping to deliver in the next month or so, we plan on adding provisioning against autonomous database. So it's not there yet, but we are planning on adding it. If you want to connect to autonomous with this instance or with this marketplace image today, you can do it. You would just have to wire it up manually, which is not very difficult at all. Next
Perfect.
slide.
Yes. Here we go.
So there's the why upgrade, I think, that Patrick kind of alluded to in the beginning. And there's a long list. We could probably have a 2-hour, 3-hour discussion on why it's important to upgrade. Some companies understand why or why not. Others, well, others just simply do not, and for some reason stay on old versions forever, which these days becomes very risky. As I mentioned, there are some features in Forms that are very unique to it compared to, say, web applications. So, you know, upgrading, getting on the latest version and taking advantage of those new features definitely adds value. For example, the option to choose a browser or not a browser, right? Obviously, with a web application, you don't really get to make such a choice. Integrating with software and hardware on the user tier, again, that's something that realistically only Forms can do. Not only Forms, but by comparison to a web application, you know, page running in a web browser really has no way to interact with the client side. Forms can. And similar is true on the server. So on the server, through a Forms application, you could manipulate both the software and the hardware on the server if necessary, or even remote servers for that matter. And in the case of running outside of a browser, we're not impacted by a browser change. So for example, if tomorrow Microsoft decides, hey, we're going to come out with yet another version or flavor of Microsoft Edge, we don't care, because from our point of view, it has no impact. So that's kind of helpful. It seems that browsers are updated. It seems like it's almost daily, even though I realize it's not, but browsers are updated so frequently nowadays. I watch web pages break one after another as I go through the course of the week. So it's kind of nice to have a Forms application in that scenario. The second bullet there talks about upgrading regularly in order to make upgrading easier. Perfect example is if you're coming from version 11 and moving to version 12, all you have to do is regenerate your modules and you're off and running. There's no code changes required. There's effectively nothing required to change except for the underlying software itself, right? Change the Forms version from 11 to 12, and off you go. If you have a current support account with us, there's no cost in doing that besides your time. So upgrading regularly is important. If you're coming from an old version, let's say version 6 or older, there is certainly a possibility that you might need to make some code changes, you may need to make some user interface changes, and of course there's a learning concept that has to go into play as well, because the technology is very different. So, I mean, you're going to go from old client server to a modern web environment, which fundamentally is very, very different. And of course, there's this idea of modernization, that term that's been floating around for several years now, and it seems like a buzz term that no one knows how to define. So whether modernization to you is upgrading or reinventing or redesigning a user interface or changing technologies from A to B, one thing to remember is that by upgrading from an old version to a new version of Forms, you get to take advantage of exactly what I was just describing, right? You could go from an old application that looks like it belongs on Windows NT 4 to a modern, more current version, which looks like a more modern flavor. That said, there is some effort on your part as well. I always like to use the example of this. If in your application code you've made a button purple, it will forever be purple until the application dies because you made it that way. It is absolutely important to understand that just because you upgrade, the application won't look different in most cases. There are some exceptions to that, but as a general statement, for everything you've coded, we're not going to change your code. We don't want to do it. It's your code. We don't know if you want it changed. So if the background color on your text fields is green, it will forever be green regardless of what color you upgrade to until you change the code. So part of your upgrade effort should account for time to spend a little time reviewing your code and making some fresh updates to it. So that's important as well.
Exact, and we'll see a bit later on, but you know, by the use of ORMIT Analyzer, it's easy to identify right off the bat everything that maybe has been specifically customized or hard-coded into some specific colors, and makes it then much easier to target those areas and address those modernization if we're talking about user interface.
Exactly.
I wanted to add one thing about why upgrade that we sometimes forget, but it's also an interesting area to keep in mind is that the latest version of Forms 12.2.1.4 is compatible with some of the latest versions of the database. So upgrading to the latest versions of Forms also opens up your system to be running with the latest version of the database, and just that by itself, running on 19C and taking advantage of everything 19C can do, is also a notable advantage for the overall system and capabilities.
Okay. Next slide. Roadmap ahead, my favorite topic. So for those of you that don't know, as a product manager, at least at Oracle anyway, my main effort, let's say, as a product manager is to always be looking forward going. I don't generally spend a whole lot of time looking back on older versions, although in some cases I am brought back into older versions. So for me, even version 12 is kind of an obsolete version, because for me, my job is to make sure that the versions we're working on going forward are kind of in line with what our customers' needs are and what the industry is doing and what Oracle is doing and all those kind of things. So some of the things we're looking at for the roadmap ahead, and this is where that safe harbor statement comes in, are included here. These are all shown in the form statement of direction, which you could read the entire document using that note number that you see at the bottom through My Oracle support. It's also available as a white paper on oracle.com on the Forms product page. But some of the key things to hit on here that hopefully jump off the page at you are the ability to access data through REST. This has been a conversation for quite a long time now, and for one reason or another, we just never did it. But now more than ever, we're finding enough demand and need to do it that we are actively developing it. So the ability to reach out to REST services and get data is going to be, I think, pretty powerful for Forms, because if you think about it, right now, Forms has a tight dependency on the Oracle database. Once we do this, in theory, you would potentially be able to not use an Oracle database to get your data. That isn't necessarily the intent of why we're doing this, but it is a side effect of what we're doing. So that should be a pretty helpful change for those customers that are still interested or willing to do some development in their applications. There's always lots of performance improvements and security improvements. The next big one, though, next to the REST support, are changes to the user interface. I've cheated a little bit and shared some of that information with you in social media over the past couple of years, and even at some of the conferences that I've done around the world in the past few years. Specifically on Twitter, speaking of social media, I've shot out a few pictures of what we were working on, kind of as prototypes. In all those cases, exactly what I said earlier is true. Even though the functionality may exist in a coming version, it's going to be up to you to go into your application and leverage it. In other words, maybe turn it on or turn it off, or somehow leverage whatever the new feature is for the user interface. We're not going to change your existing applications automatically. However, that's where partners like RENAPS come in, where potentially they could come in and assist you with doing those changes. And also there's some other tools out there that can help you do that as well. But we are planning on offering some more modern updates to some of the widgets that we have in the UI. We are also looking at improving some of the general UI functionality. So not necessarily something you could see, but something you could do. For example, right now, we don't really provide good support for multiple monitors or dual monitors. In fact, we purposely restrict you from programmatically moving from monitor to monitor. However, one of the enhancements we're working on is to potentially relax some of that limitation so that now programmatically you'll be able to move from, let's say, move an application window from monitor 1 to monitor 2 or back and forth or whatever the case is. So that'll be a nice functional improvement. And there's a variety of those we're doing. That was just one example. So lots to come in the future. Take a look at that statement of direction. You'll get kind of a high level idea of what we're working on.
Thank
Next
you,
slide.
All right. Well, from here, we can jump into the subject of the ORMIT suite. We do a little back and forth with Mike in some other areas of the presentation. So to go back into the migration suite, the first and foremost item that you see on the top of the suite is all of the other tools. That's what makes it easy to scan, basically as an X-ray, all of your items, whether you're talking with re-engineering. Talk about our migration expertise and what we've accomplished. We've done over 350 software upgrades. When we talk software, mostly Oracle Forms, by upgrading, migrating, and modernizing those systems. In all of these, we've always leveraged automation. So we make it, we reduce basically the time required for any of those projects, as well as the risk, of course, by up to 9 and sometimes more, depending on the code and what needs to be there. And the approach that we follow when we upgrade or modernize is always in line with Oracle recommended best practices. What I mean by here, we're not introducing code or something that is not supported by Oracle Forms. So the process that we have is pretty similar for any project, whether you want to upgrade forms, modernize forms, or if you want to migrate reports, as an example, to BI, to Analytics Publisher. So we always start by an X-ray scan, after which we get a very detailed migration analysis report that determines all the aspects and gives us all the information we need. We launch a simulation of that upgrade or migration. And from there, we actually launch the actual migration. We take care of the manual interventions, and we're then ready for deployment. That approach basically makes sure that it is error-free, risk-free. We have a flexible deployment, so we can as much deploy on a single node environment or on a clustered environment. So we also make sure that the team is trained, ready to take care of that system once it's been upgraded, migrated, re-engineered. So if we go a bit deeper down into the ORMIT analyzer, so that's our forms and reports code analysis tool. And well, why analyze? The first thing is, well, get to know your code. By scanning of all of your objects, you will get to know all the details of sometimes years and years of development, maybe not always by the same developers. We have systems that have evolved and where developers came and left. And so you have a history sometimes of even different standards through a complete application. So the fact of analyzing your code and to know your code is itself a pretty interesting feature to be able to detail all the built-ins, and I'll show you a free screenshots to see what the fire. So we go into also I apologize for that. So I was just getting into the subject of why analyze your code, and that second slide here about that subject is really to know about and to make sure that you are in line with your actual intention, your project, whether you want to upgrade, you want to migrate, modernize your application. In all of these cases, you want to foresee maybe the problematic areas based on hundreds of past projects that we've accomplished. So it's a good idea to at least have a clear path, a clear picture of your project, whether you have some steps that are upcoming that will be automated, maybe some will be manual. So it's always a good idea to to have a detailed scope, time, and effort analysis. So there is no surprise once you actually get into that project. You really know what to expect. From here, I wanted to share just a few screenshots of sample output. As an example here, just a quick high-level summary about what areas that we analyze and that we identify. As you can see here, sometimes reserved word conflicts or obsolete properties. We then also have a different view. So the ORMIT analyzers also will give you all of the number of items and blocks, canvases, windows, all of this to also give you a high-level idea of where's your from here, you also would get a built-in analysis. So all of the existing built-ins from Oracle Forms are completely identified through your whole application, and we let you know how many files are impacted by this particular built-in, and also how many total invocations of those built-ins. So just give you some high-level aspects. By the way, we are right now in the process of making available the ORMIT analyzer through the Oracle Cloud Marketplace. So that is currently in progress. It will probably take another month or so, maybe two, to be up and running and to be there. But just wanted to give a heads up on that. And here's another example of reference analysis. So you can see from whether it's a static reference or a runtime reference, we know before you start any project, which object is dependent on which other objects. And then there's a bunch of other information here. I'm just giving you a few samples, basically, from that. The typical report that you get from this type of activities sometimes goes to up to 100 pages. And here, you have the Oracle Forms analysis deliverable. So the deliverable from this type of analysis, as I was mentioning, is we're talking easily about 100 pages, sometimes document, which covers all the aspects of your application, gives you great insight, great documentation on what are you facing really, what do you really have in your code, and at the same time give you scope, time, and effort for an actual proposal, whether your intention was maybe to upgrade, was to modernize, to re-engineer some parts of your code, or to lighten your code. All of that are good reasons to run an analysis. From here, I wanted to get maybe more into the subject of Oracle ORMIT Forms. So again, ORMIT stands for Oracle Migration Tool. And ORMIT Forms is a specialized tool that's been already in the market for over 15 years now. It's been upgrading through the years and always being in line with the latest API from Oracle Forms. And what this tool, the objective of that tool is first to upgrade you to the latest version. So that's the first objective of why ORMIT Forms was initially developed. And as you can see here, through different stages of a typical upgrade project, whether you're in the analysis phase, the planification, the actual migration, or the pre-deployment tasks or post-migration tasks, if we can say more the manual steps of those projects, we automate a very large portion of that. So that's how you save using ORMIT through all these particular stages of a project. So another little screenshot of that tool here, where you can see an example of a Form 6i application that needs to be upgraded. So typically we just select those objects, run the tool through different areas, and automatically replace obsoletes, automatically migrate and upgrade to the latest version. We of course have a very detailed migration report that is issued, and we handle thousands of files into one batch. So there's no limit, whether you're in Form 6 or 11 or 10, whatever version, and you want to upgrade to the latest version. So that's definitely the way to go to make it easier and faster. Here you see a little example of a migration report. So you see in blue or the items that are automatically replaced and handled. In red, some of which that require some manual intervention, whether in the code or whether in the application server, but just an aspect that needs to be thought through. Once the migration, the upgrade, or whichever path you're taking for your system are completed, all of the automated steps are, of course, not only documented outside of your code, but also in your code. So here's just a little example of looking at a previous command that was then replaced by the updated version of it that is compatible, maybe in that particular case, with version 12, I believe. So you always keep track of what really was changed through your application. And along with the upgrade functionality, then there's always all these aspects that needs to be taken care of, whether manually or through what we call wizards. And we have a lot of wizards that are available within the same ORMIT Forms tool. That tool, is, as I mentioned, is as much used for upgrading than for re-engineering. And we'll show you a few examples after that. So the wizards, cover areas such as maybe advanced search, replace, compare utilities. You can go through changing properties across items, forms, and all type of other objects. There are some wizards to increase your screen resolution, and we'll show you an example of that in the next couple of slides. And those are just examples, but there's a lot of wizards that can be leveraged for many requirements and many needs that we've seen through 300 plus projects. So that's how this tool has been always enhancing but always in line with what our customers needed to do. In terms of, if we go now into using that same tool, but more in a re-engineering or modernization aspect, you can use the same tools, and we do for, as an example, there's really no limit in what you can do, what you could want to do in your code. But a few examples, if you want to adjust your screen resolution from, you probably remember all these older screens in 640 to 480, or the smaller resolution screens, which today look all tiny in a corner sometimes of your screen. So we have a wizard for that. If you want to increase or modernize your look and feel as well of your interface or through the entire application, and also standardize your look and feel. Sometimes you can have areas with different developers that took care of it and had a different approach than another one. So it's a good occasion to also standardize and modernize. So as an example here, you see an older screen. Everything is cramped into a smaller area of the overall screen. And after the wizard does its job, the same information is now just spread proportionally into a bigger, wider area. So it makes it much easier to maintain, for developers, not just developers themselves, but also for the end user to have leverage a bit more of your real estate on your actual screen. When you look at look and feel, so here you see a very basic default looking, I would say, look of an application. We could modernize and spend a bit of time to make it maybe a bit more appealing, or we could go way further and give it a, and all of what you see right here is 12C, nothing outside of what's native in 12C. So flat looking, much more modern. So it really gives 10 years less, or maybe even 20 years less to your look and feel of your system. And those are just examples. What we typically do when customers ask us to address and to better a look and feel of an application, we first spend maybe a day with one of our designers to first understand, what is going to be the future look of your system, and we propose some ideas. We proposed a few aspects that can be looked at, and also, I mean, different looks. And from there, once it is accepted by the customer, we jump into the actual change, and all of that always through automation. So, Mike, you shared recently some ideas on your Twitter account of really beautiful looking look and feels that when you look at it, some customers might ask, is that really forms? And in fact, it is all forms, and it's not even the latest version. So, Mike, if you want to comment a bit on that one.
Sure. So as Patrick mentioned, these are just some examples that I was experimenting with internally, just to see how difficult it would be to create something that doesn't look quite so Windows NT 4 looking. And what I quickly found was it isn't difficult at all. And I really want to encourage everybody to spend just a little bit of time to try to think about the concepts here and leverage them. And I will admittedly say I am not a graphic designer or UI designer by trade. That is not my profession. So this was me just playing around, trying to copy something or make something resemble what you see on let's say, a web page, for example. And what I ended up with was not just these three examples, several others, but these just seem to be simple enough to show and kind of talk about. But minus the title bar at the top, if I didn't tell you it was a Forms application, you probably would have no idea that it's a Forms application. And that's the key to all of this. I get feedback all the time from customers. They say, oh, my applications look old. We're going to move to a different technology because of it. And what you have to remember is, and this sounds like this is a little overly simplified, but maybe it is. Spending a little bit of time improving the user interface on your application, or improving anything on your existing application, is going to be far easier, far less risky, and far less time-consuming than it is to start from scratch. We have a lot of customers that talk about wanting to move to Apex or ADF or Microsoft.NET or the thousands of other options that are out there. All of those technologies are good in their own sense. But Forms is also good for what it does, and each one has its strengths and its weaknesses. If you have a working application that its only problem is that it looks old, then personally, if I was the business person making the decision, I would not start from scratch. Starting from scratch is going to be very expensive, very time-consuming, and very risky. Your decision to move to another technology should be looked at very, very carefully, because if you make the wrong choice, you may find yourself a lot of money down the road and a lot of time down the road only coming back to where you started. For companies and customers talking about mobile, I see in the chat a lot of people are talking about mobile. Hey, will Forms have a mobile client? The answer is no. Forms is a Java client, and right now, as far as I know, no mobile platform supports the full Java client. So until such time that happens, we won't do that. However, that doesn't mean your Forms application is no good anymore, because think about it. The vast majority of what your Forms application should be used for is a desktop application, right? Mobile would only be a secondary branch to what the application does. If you're looking to build solely a mobile application with no desktop functionality, then you probably should start from scratch. But if your desktop application today does what it needs to do, don't throw everything away.
Thank you, Mike. And since we just have about a few minutes left, I thought I'll try to accelerate on my side a bit last couple of slides so we can get to that question and answer period as soon as possible. And I see there's quite a number of questions from many people, so we can use that. And so in terms of modernization aspects, there's many other things. Those are just examples, but integrating with web services, internationalizing your application, or just looking into end user productivity enhancements, making the application faster for everyone, are good examples as well. So introducing today the Forms SSH. So it's the only shell terminal that's designed for Oracle Forms. It's basically a Forms compatible shell script that within the same browser tab of your application, this all works through, of course, JavaScript because it's in the browser, but gives you a secured shell terminal being accessible directly from your code. And so if you have a Forms application running, it's JavaScript based. It includes, of course, that library, PL/SQL, as well as the JavaScript source code for you to be able to maintain that. And we can implement that for you or make you a demo if you'd like to have a personalized demo. We had a very small little demo here just to show a little application where we would launch, simply as that in that example, a SQL plus command. So as you can see here, directly from your Forms application, we're opening a shell terminal where you can, interact maybe with scripts, with shell scripts, or all type of process sometimes. Any code that you have, some legacy code that needs to be easily more integrated with your application, instead of calling a putty outside of your application through a host command. So this is a much easier approach to avoid any confusion sometimes for the end users. I'll jump to the next slide. We have only 3 minutes left, which, by the way, we're happy to take more time with everyone to answer more questions. Just want to respect everybody's time. But whoever wants to or would like to stay a bit longer after this, we're here to stay. We will be answering every question and be going through some more material. So Mike, if you want to comment maybe on reports and what to do for customers running on still on reports.
Sure, we could certainly do that. All of this information is published, so let's make sure that that's clear. This is this is available on the Oracle website, but we're just kind of reiterating it here. As I mentioned with 12.2.1.4, just in general, not even just reports, Premier support goes through August 2022, extended support through August 2025. Error correction support for 12.2.1.3 has been extended through December 2021 for 12.2.1.3. So if you happen to remain on 12.2.1.3 of reports, you'll be able to get bug fixes and that kind of thing without upgrading to 12.2.1.4. I don't recommend doing that, but if for whatever reason you need to do that, this will allow you to do that. Because 12.2.1 of reports is now deprecated, that means that there's no enhancements planned for reports, no new features. Bug fixes will be done on a case-by-case basis. It's basically frozen in time and in maintenance mode. It is unclear as to whether or not we will continue delivering it, so I would not plan on that. Realistically, you should be planning on a migration to Analytics Publisher, or previously BI Publisher. Analytics Publisher is available as an on-premise product. It is also available as a cloud product, specifically as part of Analytics Cloud Service. So you could get it either way. The licensing entitlement that you currently have to run forms and reports now includes entitlements to run Analytics Publisher on-premise. If you want to move to cloud, you'll have to talk to our sales guys about migrating your on-premise entitlements to cloud credits. I honestly do not know how that works. You'll have to contact them.
We can help on that front if someone needs assistance or just understanding how this works and how we can do a migration or bring your own license model. We can definitely help as well.
Awesome. And then, of course, the last point on there is the fact that version 12 of Forms added integration with Analytics Publisher or BI Publisher, so that transitioning from reports to Analytics Publisher should be a little bit easier. So if you call reports from Forms today, the code needed to call Analytics Publisher from Forms will be roughly the same. There will be some code change required, but the basic concept will be exactly the same. You'll still use the run report object built in Forms, and the basic coding syntax and practices will be basically the same. So that shouldn't be too difficult of a transition.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. So if your intention is to move towards BI Publisher, Analytics Publisher now, well, we have a tool for that too. As I mentioned, we have upgrades tool, analysis tool, but we also have migration tools. So migrating from Forms to Java, from reports to BI Publisher, or many other options are all fully available, and that those capabilities are there to help make those projects easier, automate as much as possible. In any report, you have a data model as well as a layout. So we can capture all that information. We leverage, of course, XML, and we make it easy for customers to do that transition from reports to BI publisher. And same process. We'll always go through first an analysis, and after that analysis, we actually provide you with an estimation, and we can share efforts and act as an extension to your team. All right, so in summary today, Oracle we saw is continuously improving and innovating. Forms is there's limitless capabilities of what you can do with it. It's just a question of deciding what you want to do, but should you decide to improve your look and feel, to modernize, to integrate with other systems through web services or any other aspect, Forms is capable to do that. RENAPS Center of Excellence, our team is here to help you, whether you want to do any of those projects, you want to upgrade, migrate, modernize. We're happy to be here and to assist you through any of your requirements. And the ORMIT suite is a suite of tools that, as you saw, eliminates the risk, guarantees your success, whether you want to upgrade, migrate, will of course reduce the efforts through automation. By reducing efforts, it will also reduce, of course, the time and the cost of your overall project. And if you want a personalized demo of any of the solutions that we talked about today, we'll be happy to do that. In terms of projects and customers we've dealt with, it's just a little snapshot of some of which we have worked on. I believe some of these logos are present with us today. We have a few customer case studies also available on the oracle.com website, among which for some of our solutions covering Forms upgrades, but also for Oracle Jet, for Apex, and we have many more customer case studies that we will be happy to share with you upon request. As I mentioned, we're based in Canada, in Montreal. We also have offices in the US, in New York. Here you'll have a link, and we'll share all that information with you after the call, after the webinar, sorry, covering some of the links for the Forms and Reports hub page on our website. We also have a YouTube channel called RENAPS Academy, and if you need any pricing information or any details, so that's how to reach us through simply a simple email or call on that phone number, or through an email, info@renaps.com. It's going to be the easy way to join us anytime. So I'd like to maybe open it up for questions. Maybe we can address questions that have not been addressed yet, if there is anything left. I saw that there was a lot of activity.
Michael answered most of it, but so
okay.
if your questions are not answered, please just ask again if you can, just to make sure we address it.
And in the meantime, I want to say a big thank you to everyone for being here, and also a special thank you to Mike for having you and talk about Forms, and it's a real pleasure. We look forward, hopefully, to see you in Montreal soon, maybe after that pandemic. We'll be happy to see you here. Let's see if there's any question. Thank you, Mike, for a few links up there. I personally follow, and RENAPS follows Mike's Twitter, where there's always some interesting activity going on about what's coming with Forms. So a big thanks to everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you in the next webinar, hopefully, maybe this year or maybe at the beginning of next year.